still working? How you doing? Good. So you're having fun? Yeah. This is not a selfie. It would be actually quite difficult to take a selfie from that angle, wouldn't it? Anyway. I'm going to come back to this guy later. He's got an important story to tell, so we've got a story for that. But in the meantime, there's a little place in North America where the pen is. You've probably never heard of it. It's in Illinois. There's a town there called Bloomington, and there's a suburb in the town called Normal. So as far as I'm aware, it's the only place in the world that really, truly is normal. When you leave, that's what you see. It's true, this is the sign. As you drive out of Normal, you see that. What I'm saying to you is that sign's in your rear view mirror. You've already left Normal in terms of learning and development. Does that make sense? Because I think you've been talking about change today amongst a whole lot of other things. You've left Normal. And people say, oh no, but there's a new normal. No, that's gone too. So we're in such a state of change, it's really quite surprising how fast things are shifting. Here's a couple of photographs, and I found this on the web, where you find everything these days. Who recognises those dates? These two photographs are taken from pretty much the same spot on an event. Got a hand up.
Is it the boat?
Absolutely. Give the man something special up the back there. This was when they were waiting for the announcement of who would be the next pope on those two occasions. Look at the difference of the photographs. Just think what that means. That amount of technology getting into the hands of the general populace. Now, we kind of know that there's some really flash tech stuff going on in laboratories and places. We sort of accept that. But that's flowing through into the whole population so quickly. I blew this up. See the top, there's just one little old Motorola clamshell. That first one. Do you remember those? You used to flip them open. Felt so cool. You put them in your pocket and flip, like Captain Kirk. I used to have one. I felt so good. Now I sort of, anyway. So, but one thing that's happened is the 70-20-10 framework. Now, I'm sure you're all aware of that. You're thinking about it. You're thinking about informal learning. The technology's had a massive impact on how we can work with this. But let's be really clear, it didn't create it. The 70-20-10 was around long before social media or any of the technology that we've got. Now, it's an interesting model. I've got a couple of notes to make sure I get the right things covered off here. The reason it's a very interesting model is I quite like it. I love it. It's a great model. The reason it's really good is because you can use it to explain to people in the business that learning doesn't just happen in a classroom. Now, you guys know that. You're learning professionals. People in the business often don't. I get a lot of nods around the room. They kind of think that learning happens in a formalised classroom, educational type of context. And who's to blame them? Over the years, they were told from when they were age 5, sit down, be still, be quiet in class, listen, and you will be successful if you sit still and learn what we're giving you. Yeah? And then they go to university, chalk and talk, pass an exam, suddenly you've got a qualification. To them, that's what learning is. It couldn't be so, some learning happens there, absolutely. But we know that a lot doesn't. So what's really nice about this model is if you go to those people in the business and you say, well, actually, of all the things that you know in order to do your job, which of those things did you learn in the classroom? And what proportion of them did you learn someplace else? And in fact, that's exactly how these figures came to be. There were some studies done 20, 25 years ago, actually in this crowd, and they actually went and asked successful business people, where did you learn what you know in order to do the job you're doing? And they ended up with a ratio like this. Now, these figures aren't exact, but that's where it came from. So it's in effect a self-reported set of figures from a group of successful business people. Unfortunately, what's happened, it's been brought into all sorts of other areas and made to seem a lot more exact than what it is. Now, I'll come on to some of the reasons why actually the model has some shortfalls. But let's stick on the good stuff. What's really good about it is you can ask them, where did you learn? And they'll say, well, actually, they'll come up with most of what I know to do my job, I didn't learn in the classroom. So you're starting to, in effect, challenge a bit the idea that all learning happens in a classroom. And that can be useful when you're trying to work with them around different sorts of learning interventions, whether that's an in-the-moment performance support or coaching or action learning sets or anything else like that. So that's one of the reasons the model's really, really useful, is people kind of get it. But it also focuses us and anybody else on the fact that learning happens in the flow of work in the workplace as well. Because we've often kind of ignored that. We've sort of forgotten that actually a lot of learning happens just because we're there. It happens almost like a side effect of life. And that's an interesting phrase. Who here went to a formal class to learn how to manage a household? And yet most of you do. Or you've learned who to delegate that to. But you see, you didn't go to class to do that, but actually it's quite a complex set of behaviours and set of things to know how to do, isn't it? So what happens is we end up, a chap called Alan Rogers had this interesting, it's in the book there somewhere, the dichotomy of, he called it learning conscious learning or task conscious learning. And there's everything in between. The idea is that learning conscious learning is, to some extent, an event like today, where you come along, one of the primary outputs or outcomes of that event is you want to learn something. So you go in with the conscious awareness that you're here to learn, and that's one of the primary outcomes. At a task conscious learning level, it's when you're doing something, you're paying attention to what's happening, but learning is just not on the agenda in terms of what you want out of it. Nevertheless, you will be learning. Does that make sense? I'll come with a little example of that in a minute, but it's ubiquitous. I've got a little, actually I'll come on to that right now. Just imagine for a moment that you are really hanging out for baked beans on toast nirvana. You've got to have baked beans on toast. Absolutely essential. This is important today. So off to the supermarket you go, and you go looking for the bread, you can find that, got that ingredient, you go looking for the baked beans, and you hunt, and they've moved them. Don't supermarkets do that? They keep moving stuff. But eventually you do find the baked beans. Maybe you ask someone, maybe you just do a search pattern up and down the aisles, you find the baked beans. You buy them, you go home, you put the toast on, you put the baked beans on top, and it's just wonderful. A week later, you want to do the same experience all over again. You go back to the same supermarket. This time you go straight to the bread, straight to the baked beans, buy stuff, home. If I was to ask you, what did you learn during those sort of activities, you'd shrug your shoulders and say, well, I don't know what. But think about it. You learned that the baked beans had moved. You learned where they'd moved to. You modified your behaviour a week later because you knew where they were now. But all of that's completely out of conscious awareness as a learning experience. Does that make sense? I was a guy in a building society, L&D manager. He took me at my word, and he went out in the corridors. He was always thought of a bit of a nutter, so he got away with it. And he went to the corridors, and he'd stop anybody that he came across and said, when did you last learn something? And they'd look at him, but they knew he was a nutter. And the typical response he said he got over a couple of weeks he did this was, the last training course, or at university, or something formal was what came out. So he said, I changed the question, I was getting sick of that answer. So I said, when was the last time, to the people he was asking, when was the last time you changed something you were doing from the way you used to do it to a new way of doing it? And almost everybody had an example within the last day or two at the most. Oh, I wrote this report differently. I did this differently. And he said, why did you do it differently? And they'd start giving all these reasons. And he said, wait a minute, doesn't that mean you learned something in order to change the behaviour, change what you... Oh yeah. See, people are unaware of learning. Learning is a really ubiquitous thing. It happens just all the time. One of the things, I was chatting with James and Tristan earlier, And I said I'd include this little piece. Learning is, a metaphor I sometimes use, I've started to use it more recently, is just think about healing as something that you do as an animal, as a human being. If you cut your finger, it heals, right? You don't have to think about that. Now, if it's a really bad cut, ouch, you can go to the doctor and they'll put a couple of stitches in it and put some antibiotics on it, and it will probably heal a little bit better and accurately and so on. Now, if your body didn't have that innate ability to heal, would what the doctor did make any difference? Wouldn't, would it? The doctor's ministrations are worth absolutely zip without the body's innate ability to heal. Your innate ability for healing. If a doctor came to you and said, I'm going to deliver you some healing, the big sign on the front door, healing delivery. Doesn't make any sense, does it? Think about learning in the same way. We have an innate ability to learn. We've been doing it as long as we've been doing healing stuff for ourselves. So in the healing thing, think about informal healing as the way your finger heals, the way a bruise comes right, automatically, without you thinking about it. The formal healing is what the doctor does. But they leverage, they work off the body's already innate ability to heal. They don't deliver the healing, they just help it happen. A little better, a little faster, a little stronger, a little whatever. Okay, with a little less risk. Learning is the same. Formal learning is you guys doing stuff that helps people who are already excellent learners learn better, faster. So it's different way to think about it. What you're there is to help people who are already excellent learners learn a little differently, learn better, learn quicker. And so much of that learning is happening outside of their conscious awareness because they are so good at it.